And we are on the air. This is Raven Central Radio. I am Sean Brubaker, and we are live. And with me, as always, and live, is co-host Shahan Pires. What's up, Shahan?
It's a little sad to have a show without that awesome intro song from Kid Gowie, isn't it?
It is. It is. Hopefully, Brian will edit that in for the iTunes edition. But I think the novelty of being live again, however short-lived it is, makes up for it at least a little bit. So I hope you all enjoy our special live edition post-draft.
Post-draft, and what a draft it was.
It was a boring draft. Well, at least the first round was. After that, it got good.
Well, the Blake Bortles pick was pretty awesome. No one saw that coming.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. The quarterbacks kind of got things ending on the right note, but a lot of it went as expected. I was kind of disappointed that there weren't any ridiculous picks like a Tyson Alualu in the 10th round, or a 10th pick overall, rather, not 10th round. How much fun would that be if we went back to the days of like 10-round drafts?
I think we should.
I
Actually, I
think
don't
we
think we should.
should. Move it back to April, but make it so long that it lasts into May. How about that?
We'll see about that. Hopefully
Yeah,
they
I
move
would
it back
watch
to
that.
April,
I would
because,
totally do a round a day. I would totally do that.
yeah,
It might
maybe.
get old after a while.
I think it would.
I don't know.
After a certain point, people just don't know who's going off the board.
Right, and I think Roger Goodell just needs to stop messing with it. Move it back to April. Leave it be. They're not going to move it back though. The ratings were huge this year.
Yeah, I know, it kind of sucks.
I know, and I didn't even watch it live, so you can't blame me because I don't have cable.
Anywho, we've
But
talked for
anyway,
about a couple of minutes about this draft, and we haven't talked about the Ravens at all.
no, we haven't. No, we haven't. But I have a big old document of notes here with grades, which grades are whatever at this point of the year. I'll admit that. But we have them, and we're going to share them. So, Shahan, how about we get right into it?
Oh man, Sean and I were watching, or at least chatting while watching the draft. We saw that the Ravens come on the board with HaHa Clinton Dix still available. I don't know about you. I was almost certain that they were going to go with HaHa. Were
I was
you?
I was almost certain. For a second there, I thought you were asking a rhetorical question to the crowd, and then I realized I'm the crowd. So, no, I was very confident. I really thought it was coming down to Zach Martin or HaHa Clinton Dix at that spot. And Martin was off the board, but Dix wasn't, so I was about ready to buy my Dix jersey. But that's not what happened.
No Dix for you, Sean. Unfortunately, actually, I
Wow.
shouldn't say unfortunately. C.J. Mosley, I was disappointed in the moment, but he's a pretty great player, and I think he was a solid pick. I don't know if he was unquestionably the best player on the board. I still really like Clinton Dix, as Sean and I have both expressed in great detail over our scouting reports. But Mosley's good. Mosley's very talented. Mosley's very solid. I know you're not as high on him. I think he's definitely well-rounded enough to be, you know, an anchor in the middle of that defense, be a cornerstone for a long time.
Well, I fully expect him to be a Pro Bowler. I genuinely do.
Hmm.
His talent level is not why I don't like the pick. There's a lot of reasons I don't like the pick, but his talent level and my expectations for his success are not it. I really have a lot of questions about. Well, first of all, his durability is a bit of a question mark. I do trust the Ravens in terms of that regards. They rarely draft an injury risk and see the player go out of the league because of injuries. That doesn't happen very often. They seem to have a good staff in that regard. But just the position of inside linebacker, the Ravens had a top 20 pick for the first time for a long time, and they go inside linebacker, perhaps the position with the least impact on a defense. Outside of the Ray Lewis's, Patrick Willis's, Brian Urlacher's their day, there really aren't that many inside linebackers worth a top 20 pick to me. I mean, there are a lot of really good ones. Don't get me wrong. John Beeson was a good inside linebacker. And, I mean, there's a lot of guys like that. But they're just guys. They don't make good defenses. So I have a problem with the positional value when the Ravens are still weak at pass rush, they're still weak in the secondary, and they go inside linebacker. So I have a problem from the positional value standpoint.
How can you wear that Ravens hat and belittle the importance of the middle linebacker after we've had good fortune of Ray Lewis manning and leading that defense for so long?
I'll tell you how. Who did they have across from Ray Lewis all the time? Guys that they did not pick very highly at all, who turned into pretty good players. Bart Scott, undrafted. I don't remember if Ed Hartwell was drafted or not, but he was not a high draft pick. I mean, Jameel McLean was a pretty good player before his injury, and he was undrafted. Donnell Ellerbe, undrafted.
Bart
The
Scott?
list goes on. I said Bart Scott.
Oh, sorry.
But
I guess
yeah,
I wasn't listening.
that's offensive to me. But the list goes on. And when the Ravens did draft linebackers, it didn't always pan out super well. I mean, remember Tavares Gooden? Third-round pick. And they tend to go with the athletic guys when they draft. Tavares Gooden, Arthur Brown, and now Mosley, who's a very athletic linebacker. But every time they go with them, people ask, are they fits in the 3-4? Now, Mosley, I think, has the potential to be. But with Arthur Brown, the size is still a limitation. The two of them combined weigh about 470 pounds. The ideal would be for the two of them combined to weigh about 500 pounds. And weight, of course, is just a number, but even the way they play, Mosley is not a thumper. He's a capable defender in the 3-4, I believe, but he's not a thumper. And Arthur Brown, I still have questions about his ability to operate in this defense outside of pass coverage, just because he's kind of scrawny and he plays scrawny.
Okay,
So,
well, hold on. First of all, Arthur Brown has reportedly put on some weight, as he should. So let's hold your tongue on that. And secondly, this is about C.J. Mosley alone. So what grade did you give the pick?
a C.
You gave it a C?
When Mosley was picked by the Ravens in the first round, I asked myself, are the Ravens significantly better after this pick than they were before it? The answer for me was no.
Yeah, but okay, I think measuring a pick along those lines factors in need greatly, don't you think?
To an extent. But if you're taking a player you feel that strongly about in the first round, as they clearly did about Mosley, even if it's not a need, you expect him to be an upgrade unless you have a Pro Bowler at the position, which the Ravens don't. Darryl Smith is good, but across from him, there is a question mark. I will admit that. So Mosley probably will get to start across from him. But how much of an upgrade is Mosley? Even if he's a significantly better player, will the Ravens' defense be significantly better because they upgraded that inside linebacker position? I have my questions.
Maybe not this year, but I think in the long run, as you said, assuming he stays healthy. I mean, Nick Saban absolutely raved about his leadership. I don't want to get too much into the character because obviously we don't know too much, but I've only heard good things, like tremendous things about his character. He seems like a really good leader. I think he has the range, he has the athleticism. You talked about it too, and I've seen a number of analysts point it out as well. He is probably the favorite for the Defensive Rookie of the Year award. He should rack up tackles. He should make plays from the middle of the defense. I honestly, I'm on the fence between an A and a B. I think he was the best player on the board, right up there with Clinton Dix in my mind. So I'd be leaning towards a B plus, just because I think Clinton Dix would definitely have made this defense a lot better right now. Agreed? I think we can agree on that.
Yeah, I do agree with that.
But
I do want to say, I'm not basing my grade off who they didn't pick. Mm-hmm. I would have sooner them take Dix, but I'm not basing my grade on the fact that Dix was available necessarily. It's a factor, a small one, though. I'm basing my pick on Mosley and how much better the Ravens are because they drafted him, and I think the answer is, for me, not much.
I think they did get the best player on the board. So I'm gonna go with a B plus.
I do want to add a caveat to what I've been saying. The reason certain inside linebackers have become special players, Brian Urlacher, Ray Lewis, Patrick Willis, is because they lead those defenses. What you said about his character, that's what I've been hearing too. That's the only reason it's not a D for me, is because he seems to have that leadership that could turn him into a true franchise-altering inside linebacker. it's a very rare thing, but his leadership has been highly touted. If he can become the true leader of this defense, much the same way as Urlacher and Ray Lewis were, I will eat crow. But
You'll eat crow?
I will eat crow. Have you heard that? You haven't heard that saying before?
I've never heard that.
Well, it's a thing. But I will eat my words if he turns into that level of player. But even if he turns into a Pro Bowl linebacker, I don't think the impact was enough with the 17th pick in the draft for how excited they were to be picking that high.
Sure. I mean,
You don't have to agree. I'm glad you don't. Produces
well,
compelling radio.
I was a little heartbroken that they didn't take Clinton Dix. I was very surprised, as we said. Looking at the film, though, I mean, C.J. Mosley, the player. Do you have any negatives about him as a player?
I think he does everything very well. He doesn't stand out in any particular way, but I think he's a well-rounded, solid inside linebacker. I think he could play as well as Darryl Smith in terms of coverage and getting after the passer, but I think he could be a better run defender.
I think I guess he's not better than Josh Bynes. I think he's the second best run defender from the inside linebacker, but I think he sheds blocks so well. He uses his hands really well. He's definitely going to be a day one starter. I would be shocked if he wasn't. And I think he's going to be a huge boost for the Ravens defense. He's going to play really well. So I'm happy with the pick. He's going to lead. Eventually, he's going to turn into a really great player. I'm done. I'm done with talking about this pick. Are you?
Yeah, I'm done. We're not going to convince one another. Feel free to tweet at us and tell us who you agree with. I have a feeling I'll be in the minority here because a lot of Ravens fans were very excited about this pick. Of course, this franchise certainly values their inside linebackers more than average, which makes sense. They have a history of their franchise player being one. So feel free to let us know what you think. So how about we move on to one that I think we're probably going to disagree with again.
All right, Timmy Jernigan, defensive tackle, nose tackle out of Florida State. I love this pick. I think the value was tremendous. I don't think there's anybody on the board after him that I would have liked the Ravens to take. I think he was widely regarded as a first-round pick, a lock for the first round before the failed drug test at the Combine. And it's important to note that he didn't test positive for anything. It was a diluted sample. And as I said before, we're not going to get too much into the character concerns, but obviously the Ravens did, and they saw no reason to shy away from the draft pick. I love what I saw on film. He's strong. You and I disagreed about what we saw on film, so why don't you give your 2 cents before we get too deep into the film?
Well, in terms of value, I agree with you. It's not a bad pick. There was some first-round.
Oh, come on now. That was a great pick.
There was some first-round buzz for him, so I have no complaints about the value. I don't even have complaints necessarily about the need like I do with Mosley. I think anytime you can get a big mauler for your defensive line, you go ahead and do it. And clearly they think Jernigan is that. I'm not sure whether they view him more as a nose or as an end in their 3-4. But I do believe that he can upgrade this defensive line. Well, I believe they think he can upgrade this defensive line. I think upgrading the defensive line is a worthy goal. So that's my 2 cents about the value and the positional need. Let's get a little more into the player. Would you like to go first, or should I?
You go ahead, because I'm pretty sure I disagree with you.
I'm pretty sure you do too. What I saw on tape was a guy who didn't excel in any one phase of the game. He has fairly good lateral quickness, but he's very, very slow off the ball. In terms of strength, strong enough to take on almost any lineman one-on-one, no problem. But when I saw him get double-teamed, I often saw him get pushed back 2 or 3 yards. And he didn't do the move that I was taught to do when I was double-teamed, which is to fall on your butt and trip up the lineman and cause a pile. I never saw him do that at all. So most of the time, I didn't see him make plays. And Shahan and I think, watched different film, too. So that might have played a role in it. I mean, I watched three games in depth. Clemson, where he looked very good. Auburn, where he looked absolutely ordinary at best. And I think NC State, where again he struggled.
He was throwing around guys in that Auburn game.
He was getting thrown around in that Auburn game.
All
We
right.
clearly did
I
not
think
see the same thing.
I think he is definitely. I mean, he'll need to bulk up for the NFL, but I think he's strong enough. He will probably struggle against double teams at least in his rookie year, but I think he has the upper body strength to at least stand up against double teams. I love the way he uses his hands. He's really violent. I saw him just like drag people to the ground a couple of times just with sheer brute force. I think he uses his hands really well. Like you said, he's not quick off the ball, but and so he doesn't really have great closing speed, but he can be somewhat effective with a bull rush and just using his hands to get a quick swim move in there to break through the line. But he's not gonna provide much in the way of pass rushing for the middle of the line. It's going to be mostly stopping the run, and I think he'll do that really well. I think he's a better fit for the nose tackle. I don't think I don't know if he's athletic or just purely quick enough to play 3-4 end right now. What do you think about his position? You talked about it a little bit, but I'm curious to hear more.
I think he'd fit kind of the Arthur Jones role. Because it looks to me that the Ravens try to have, a big mauler type of defensive end, and then more of a penetrator. And I think Chris Canty right now would be your penetrator. So I would consider Jernigan more likely to fill in as the guy that they want taking on two blockers. Not to say that Arthur Jones can't penetrate, because he did that on a regular basis. Jernigan will offer a step down from there, but I think he has potential to be roughly similar in the ground game, and I think that's what the Ravens view him as. So I would prefer to see him at the defensive end position, also because I like Brandon Williams better at the nose tackle.
Yeah, that's true. And they're kind of similar just in terms of are they of similar builds? I think they're pretty similar, right?
Brandon Williams?
Yeah, and Timmy J.
Brandon Williams got about 20, 30 pounds on Jernigan. Might be a little taller.
Really.
Or it might be shorter.
I
don't remember.
But I think the value on this pick, I think the value is just amazing. So I give this an A, with no doubt in my mind that this is an A.
I don't like to grade based on talent after the draft because it seems silly because so many people will be proven wrong. But
hold on. Grading after the draft in and of itself is a stupid exercise.
I don't disagree. I think you can do it in a way such that you're grading the process of their draft and not necessarily the players.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, I don't think that's a useless endeavor. Like, I'm going to give a higher grade to a team that traded back and got more picks for good trades and for teams that got good value as opposed to the Jaguars taking Tyson Alualu back in the day. I really rap on that pick. But
yeah, you talked about it like 4 times in the last 2 weeks.
I just remember how my jaw hit the floor and I was like, who the heck is this guy? when I heard that watching. But you get my point. There are ways you can judge a draft without necessarily having to eat your words 5 years down the road when every player does exactly the opposite of what you say. But so I guess I'm going to adjust my grade to reflect that it was a good value. I'll give it a B. But as a player, I'm not high on Jernigan at all.
All right. Well, you will eat your crow very shortly once the season starts because he's going to be big. All right. Now let's get on to a player that I think you and I both agree on, which is Terrence Brooks.
Mm-hmm. I love the pick, and I like the kid. I think good player. So
yeah. Now, full disclosure, I don't think I'd watched any of Terrence Brooks before the draft. He definitely needs some work, but I don't see a huge difference between him and Calvin Pryor. I think they're both. I mean, Brooks is the most athletic safety in this draft, at least by the combine numbers. He isn't smaller. He isn't much smaller than Calvin Pryor. He's the same height. and he plays with that same speed. I mean, that's something I'm really excited about to see the speed that they have with those two safeties, Elam and Brooks. I don't know. He might have some struggles trying to start from day one, but as of right now, they don't really have anybody else, and I think he's athletic enough that he'll at least be able to make some plays. What did you see when you turned on the Brooks film?
The two words that come to mind with Terrence Brooks are speed and instinct. He has both in abundance. And when it comes to
Which is
being
surprising because he's only played safety for 1 year.
right, but you just saw him watching the quarterback, reading the quarterback very, very well, and getting there to make the play in the passing game. And that was genuinely impressive to me because that's really hard to do. That's something that you can't really be taught. You can't be taught instinct. So he clearly has them, and he's more than fast enough to go and make the play too. He is a safety in the true sense of the word too, and that's something I appreciate about him. Whereas with Calvin Pryor, he's trying to knock your head off, but just as often he'll give up the easy tackle. Brooks did go for the tackle. Brooks wraps up. He goes for the tackle. Now he's not a strong player. He benched I think 10 reps, and it shows that
Yeah.
he doesn't look strong on tape. There are times where he just genuinely cannot bring the ball carrier down. He needs to bulk up. He needs to get better in that regard. I think a little extra strength will do a lot for him because technically I think he's a decent tackler. But otherwise, I enjoyed watching him because he just reads quarterbacks very well, and he is a safety in the sense that he's going to limit the other team's big plays. I don't think he'll make a lot of big plays for you, but he will
Yeah.
limit the other teams, and
He
that's a big deal
dropped.
for a Ravens team that has given up a lot of big plays the past couple of years.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. He dropped a ton of interceptions that hit him right in the hands. So that is a little concerning to me because I think, especially against the good quarterbacks, they make mistakes so rarely that you really have to be able to capitalize on them when you have the chance to make the play. I think I don't think he has terrible hands though. You've seen him make some really good plays over the year. So I don't think he's a lost cause, but he definitely needs to improve his ball skill. I think that's the thing that he needs to improve the most.
Yeah, he has stone hands. Now he made some incredible catches, but there were so few of them that I would call them flukes personally. I
Hmm.
think he has the ability to break up a lot of passes, but like you said, ball skills were not great. His hands were not great. And one thing, I just didn't get a chance to see it on tape. I looked and looked and looked. I couldn't find it. Jump ball battles, I didn't see him compete in many. So I guess that would be a question I would have because I haven't seen it yet. How will he fare in those situations? Instinctual, in terms of instincts, he's fine. I'm sure he'd be in the right position, but does he know what to do when he gets there? Did you get a chance to see that on tape? Because I just couldn't find it.
I only saw one jump ball, and I mean he broke up the pass. He jumps pretty high. I don't think. I mean, obviously he's going to have a tough time guarding like a Jimmy Graham or a Calvin Johnson in such a situation. But I
Well,
think,
who doesn't?
yeah, but I think his positioning is good enough that it shouldn't be a huge factor. And
Okay.
like you said, I think his greatest value is just going to be preventing huge passing plays. I think he's a true center fielder in that Ed Reed mold, and he'll be able to shore up that back line of the defense and free up Matt Elam to be near the line of scrimmage and just generally wreak havoc.
Yeah. And I want to say Ravens fans are going to love this guy. He plays with his hair on fire. He flies around the field. He's going to be fun to watch in purple and black. So I'm
Yeah,
excited to watch him play. I gave him an A.
I give it an A2. Terrific value. I mean, he has as much upside as any safety in this draft because he's so new to the position and he's so athletically gifted. And he really doesn't have too much that he needs to improve on. Ball skills, like we said, and he misses a few tackles. But other than that, I think he's pretty ready.
All right. Well, it's good to be in agreement with you for once.
And I think we're going to agree on this next one with their second pick in the third round, Crockett Gilmore.
Yep. Uh, Definitely the biggest reach of the draft for the Baltimore Ravens. I think Gilmore was more of a late round prospect, definitely a day three prospect, not a day two prospect, but they took him late on day two. And, well, we expected the Ravens to take a tight end at some point, and a big one, too. So it's not that big of a shock, but who it was, kind of a shock. So the value
I
just
don't think, yeah, I don't think who it was, but I think where it was for
Yeah.
Crockett Gilmore to go off the board. I was expecting him to go off in maybe the fifth round.
Yeah,
That
I think that's
said, there is definitely upside here. He didn't do a whole lot in the receiving game at it's Colorado State, right? Yeah, at Colorado State. But he was really good at the East-West Shrine game, and he was pretty tremendous at the Senior Bowl. And he can make some plays after the catch too. So I'm excited what he can bring to the receiving game with a little refinement of his route running. And he's big. I know you're the blocking expert, so why don't you tell me about his blocking?
he sucks at it.
He doesn't. Okay, no, he's not great at it.
He
He
really
looks a little lost out there.
in pass blocking when he can sit back and react and let a guy come to him. He looked pretty good. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
lie. Physically, I think he can handle blocking, but he was abysmal as a run blocker. Very, very high. He is 6'6". He looked stiff, and he got pushed around a lot by defensive ends. So, and when it came to time to go get a linebacker to run downfield and get a linebacker, he just didn't do a good job of engaging. He got there, but the linebacker was easily able to get around him with quickness or push him aside with strength. So he's a stiff, lumbering athlete who needs to either get the leverage part of the game down so he can focus on power, or he really needs to work on his quickness so he can actually engage linebackers on the second level. But his run blocking was very bad. So Ravens fans, I know you're probably thinking that the Ravens drafted a big tight end. He's going to be their blocking specialist. He's not. He's not. He might be an upgrade over Ed Dixon in terms of blocking, but honestly, putting Torrey Smith in at tight end would probably be an upgrade over Ed Dixon in terms of blocking. So don't get too excited about this being the Ravens blocking tight end.
he also he also just looked a little lost in terms of their scheme, and I think I saw him a couple times, running that little trying to chip and get to the second level. He really couldn't do that at all. So it's definitely going to take some time for him to be a really effective blocker. But I do like the upside. I think he has a lot of upside to be a very versatile all-around tight end. That
Yeah,
said, it was a reach.
it was definitely a reach. But actually, what I ended up liking about him when I watched him on tape was his receiving. I think he was a really good receiver, which caught me off guard. And he does have some production. I mean,
Yeah,
in 3 years, 2 of his 3 years in college, he had over 40 catches. Pretty solid. 577 yards last year. Again, pretty solid for kind of a lumbering tight end. He had some natural hands. He had some power after the catch. That's where you saw his power, more so than
yeah,
blocking.
exactly. He's
And
really good after the catch. Surprisingly good.
what surprised me, considering how lumbering he looked in blocking, he looked very fluid running his routes. He looked very comfortable running his routes. I think felt most comfortable being a receiver and not a blocker. That said, I do have one major question about his career as a receiver. He's 6'6". Colorado State had a pretty good offense. Why did he only score 8 touchdowns in his career? 2 last year. I have real concerns about his ability to produce in the red zone if you're 6'6" in a good offense and not producing touchdowns.
Yeah, I guess it's a valid concern, but I saw him go up and get the ball really well on a number of occasions. So I don't really have an answer for you, but I think he's capable of at least being productive, especially as a fourth or fifth option in a passing play.
I do agree, but I think we also need to look at this pick for what it is. At a certain point in the draft, the Ravens kind of almost stop looking at what you can do in their base packages and start looking at special teams. Crockett
Hmm.
Gilmore will be an excellent special teamer.
Hmm.
I think he'll do a great job blocking on kickoff return and punt return. Probably more kickoff return than punt return. And I think with his height, he could fit in pretty well on a field goal block and extra point block unit as well. And I think he could block well on field goal and extra point as well. So there's a lot of ways you could use him on special teams. I'm sure that crossed the Ravens' mind when they picked him. But ultimately, in the third round, you do want to see your guy become something on offense or defense. And I think Gilmore's best case scenario as a receiver is Quinn Sipniewski. Do you remember Quinn?
No.
He had like 1 year of 30 catches, and then he had injuries for the rest of his career. But I liked him. He was a mauler. He was a better blocker than Gilmore is at this point in his career. But I could see Gilmore being a solid secondary tight end, getting 20 to 30 catches a year, and being a guy that Ravens fans trust and cheer for when he gets his token 1 or 2 catches a game. That's where I see Gilmore's career going.
I think he definitely has a lot of upside. He's not gonna be a huge factor this season, which I think might disappoint some fans considering he was a third round pick. But I like what I've seen from him at least, and he was the last somewhat good tight end left on the board. Another one didn't go until the 5th round, and then it was really just a bunch of unheralded projects that went after him. So it was definitely a reach based on a position of need. And for that reason, I'm going to give it a D. I don't know. I think it was too big of a reach here.
I also gave it a D, purely
Oh.
not based on Gilmore's ability. I think even his ability, he looked more like a 4th or 5th round pick.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, yeah.
based on the value, based on the need, a D I think is a fair grade.
And the other thing, for the 3 players before, I couldn't really argue with who the Ravens went with based on who they left on the board. I know you're not factoring that in a huge amount into your grades, but they could have had a chance at Brandon Thomas to beef up the interior of their O-line, the guard out of Clemson. They could have had Bruce Ellington as a high upside receiver with some great speed to stretch the field opposite Torrey. They could have had Bashad Breeland, Pierre Desir, Walt Aikens, or even Ross Cockrell, these guys all went in the 4th round before the Ravens picked again. All those 4 guys were cornerbacks who, you have a mix of size and speed and instincts and man coverage ability, and I just don't. I think it definitely was a reach considering who they left on the board, and that's why I got the low grade for me.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think they probably could have had him later in the draft. So I think a D is a fair grade. Let's move on to Brent Urban, who also is ridiculously tall and
Yes.
Canadian.
Yeah, interesting side note. He was
Yeah.
drafted in the CFL last year, apparently.
How weird is it that the Ravens drafted 2 Canadians this year? John Urschel's also Canadian.
I did not know that.
Yep, he's born in Canada. I'm not sure that
Yeah.
he's Canadian, but he was born in Canada. So
Very interesting.
2 Canadians. That's fun. I hope they
Is
take
it-
the team on a big moose hunt or something. Okay, let's stop stereotyping Canadians and talk about Brent Urban, the football player. Or the
A lot
value.
of upside.
Certainly a lot of upside. And the value seems right.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like you said, he's big, tall. He's got the prototypical frame for a 3-4 defensive end. He has some good film too. He sort of fell off. He had a couple of injuries, and he sort of lost his quickness. But I went back and looked at some of his tape just real quick from last year,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see he has some quickness in his first step. So I think he definitely has a lot of potential. At this point in the draft, in the 4th round, I think it's a fine spot to go after. I don't think he's really going to be a huge part of the defensive line rotation this year, but I think it's the good point in the draft to go for a really high upside player like this. And I think he has a really high ceiling.
I do agree with you, and I think it was Jamison Hensley wrote an article about how the Ravens were considering Urban as early as the 2nd round. I mean,
Yeah,
he was
that's what they said.
on their radar. They really like him a lot. And Hensley was speculating that if he shows up to play right away, Chris Canty might be on the chopping block. Well, we'd hate to see that because we enjoyed having him on the show and would love to do it again.
I also think that's just a stretch. I think that would be a huge, huge bonus.
Yeah, I think that was a big stretch. Maybe could happen next year. Urban to me looked like he needed some seasoning. Is really what he looked like. He's very, very tall, showed very good strength, and surprising fluidity for a man his size. But technically, he's a work in progress, which you expect from a guy that ridiculously tall. He doesn't always use his size quite as well as he could.
And as you would expect, he plays too high relatively frequently.
Yeah,
So he needs to
absolutely.
work on his pad level. And another interesting factor that he brings to the defensive line, similar to sort of Chris Canty, but he did it better, is breaking up passes at the line of scrimmage.
Right.
He,
That's exactly what I was about to say.
he
Uh,
broke up
he
9
he
passes in 8 games this year.
yes, 9 passes, and he can just disrupt quarterbacks just based on that fact alone. And that's a unique talent that not a lot of guys have. I mean, you could stick him in at the interior of the line, and the quarterback's going to have to think twice about passing right down the middle with him in front of him, just because of his length. Which there's value to be had just in that, just in the fact that he's tall enough that he can swat passes while being strong enough to hold his own. He's not
Yeah.
an awkward, gangly guy.
And yeah. And so I think his primary position is as a 3-4 end, but he's strong enough, and Virginia used him in this quite a bit in passing situations to play in the middle of the line, and to provide some pass rush from the middle of the line. So he brings some versatility too.
Yep, I think a good pick. I gave it a B because it makes sense. It value was about right, and I can see a way for him to get on the field immediately, really. So
Yeah,
I think a B is a fair grade for this.
agree with that. He's definitely a project, so temper expectations. But if he delivers, it's going to be a steal.
Right. I think at minimum he'll be a rotational lineman and very, very good on field goal block units.
All right, second pick of the fourth round, Lorenzo Taliaferro.
That's fun to
Wonderful,
say.
wonderful name.
Fun to say. Is he
Yeah,
Italian? He didn't look Italian.
he's not Italian. I would doubt it. But Taliaferro and Crockett Gilmore, which name do you like better?
Hmm. They're both great names for such completely different reasons.
Yeah.
Crockett Gilmore, I'm thinking of Davy Crockett with a coonskin cap and a rifle. He intimidates me. Lorenzo Taliaferro, I'm thinking of The Godfather or Goodfellas or something like that.
So, and that doesn't intimidate you?
Different kind of intimidation. Like I could fight Joe Pesci, but Joe Pesci would just pull out a gun and shoot me. So I don't know.
Crockett Gilmore is my choice. I just love that name. You
It's
don't
a
see
good
names
name.
like that.
It's a great name for a guy from Colorado State too.
Hmm.
So,
All
but
right.
Lorenzo Taliaferro, very fun to say. Um, he was a one-year wonder, first of all, and
He
I
was
think
a. I think he was he a junior college transfer? Maybe I'm just making that up.
I don't think he was a transfer. I don't think he was a junior college transfer,
Hmm.
but he went off the board way sooner than I think people were expecting. Uh, More or less, I think most people considered him maybe a sixth or seventh round guy, based on the fact that he is in fact a one-year wonder, and I mean he's from a small school. He didn't play the cream of the crop defenses, so there's a
Hmm.
lot of risk here. But there's some things to like too.
First of all, it starts with his size. He's a big boy. What is he? 6 foot 230?
He is 6'2", 230, and you are right. It was junior college, Lackawanna Junior College.
Oh wow. But yeah, so he's a huge back. We've been sort of clamoring for a bigger back. We wanted the Ravens to go after LeGarrette Blunt in free agency. The Ravens got that bigger back. So at the very least, he'll be a short yardage option and a goal line option this season because he doesn't fall backwards very often. He falls forward a lot of the time. And you gotta love. He's a really good third down back too. He's an excellent pass protector. That's all I heard about during the Shrine game when people were raving about his pass protection skills. And he's got better hands than I don't think he really got a huge chance to show it at Coastal Carolina, but he's got good hands. Um, what did you like about him on tape?
I actually liked quite a bit about him. First of all, his vision is good. His vision is
Yeah,
very good.
exactly.
I mean, he finds the hole and he gets to it, and he hits the hole with power, which is that's a big deal. He's a decisive runner. He finds the hole and he hits it with power. The Ravens' top two backs, Ray Rice and Bernard Pierce, are both dancers. They're not guys that are going to be particularly decisive. I think both of them, their biggest weakness is honestly their vision as runners. Taliaferro has good vision, and he hits the whole heart. That's why he never goes down for a loss, because his goal is to pick up yards. It's not to break off an 80-yard run. If he gets 5 yards, he seems pretty happy with that. And if he pulls a defender or two along with him, all the better. So I think that really appeals to me when you have two dancers in the backfield. When the Ravens are in that 3rd-and-1 situation, Taliaferro is probably going to be your best guy right away just because he is such a decisive and powerful runner. As a goal line back, same deal. You are right about his blocking, and I do think he flashed pretty good hands. I don't think he has the shiftiness of Ray Rice in the open field, obviously.
And he doesn't have that top end speed.
No, he does not. He really is not a particularly fast back. But the guy
Sorry, go ahead.
The guy who came to mind for me was Alfred Morris. I mean, when you watch Alfred Morris on tape, he kind of looks like just a guy. He's not especially fast. He's reasonably powerful. But what makes him special is he's a decisive runner. He hits the hole hard, and he picks up 5 or 6 yards. So you provide Taliaferro with blocking, he'll provide 4 or 5 yards a pop very consistently.
Yeah,
and that's what the Ravens need.
Yeah, you talked about decisiveness and vision, and he definitely has both of those. And I think just in terms of those two factors, I think he's the best fit for Kubiak's one-cut zone blocking scheme. Obviously, we haven't seen him yet in the NFL. He's not as talented as the two backs ahead of him. But I really like how he fits in with the scheme, and I think he is going to be a good special teamer. I think he steps in from day one and has a role on the team. Not a prominent role, but I think he'll be capable of taking it on.
I agree, and here's another guy that has a similar skill set to Taliaferro as a bigger back who's not especially fast and doesn't have world-class power, but good power. Arian Foster. Now, I don't want to get Ravens fans' hopes up, but it wouldn't shock me to see Taliaferro become a 1,500-yard back just based on the strength of him constantly churning out 4 or 5 yard carries.
Mm-hmm.
There was one play that especially impressed me. It was against Montana or Montana State in the playoffs, and he took a wildcat snap, and he just willed his way into the end zone. It was a 5-yard run, and it was one of those scrums where the O-line meets the D-line. Neither side is moving. Taliaferro hits the O-line, the back of the O-line, and just pushes it into the end zone. I loved to see that when the Ravens' 2 backs last year both went down way too easily. Love to see that. I'm looking forward to seeing this guy get a couple carries. I'll be watching him closely in the preseason to see if he has a chance to actually become a guy who takes a lot of carries in the offense. So he's probably my number one guy to watch in the preseason right now.
Yeah, and so, well, first of all, I just generally am a fan of taking small school running backs because they don't have the tread on the tires that guys from Alabama and LSU have, for example, just to throw out some schools. And I think they generally get dinged a little too harshly for their level of competition they faced. Whereas, for example, Taliaferro, like you said, if you put a good O-line in front of him, I think he's going to be a really productive back.
Right.
So I like the pick a lot. I'm curious to know what do you think of the value, because like you said, a lot of the mock drafts had him going in like the 6th or 7th round. Watching the film, however, I think the end of the 4th and the 5th is a reasonable landing spot for him. What do you think?
There were just so many running backs that kind of fit into that blend of players that I don't especially love taking one who was probably on the lower end of that spectrum so early.
Mm-hmm.
His tape is solid. In terms of tape, I don't have too much of a problem with them going with him above other running backs. But when there were just so many running backs available, it seems a little silly to me to reach on one.
Yeah, 6 running backs went after he was drafted.
And I still think it was a reach.
Yeah. I think it was a reach, but I don't think it was as huge a reach. Basically, I think he's better than a 7th round pick, a 6th round pick. I think he's a 5th round pick.
Well, I gave it a C for curious.
Okay. Yeah, I'd give it a B-. I really like him as a player. But I do have to agree with what you said about the running backs. There's just so much depth. And, we've seen so many late-round guys be productive. I think they could have got more value at another position there.
Yeah, I love the fit though. It's good. It's a really good fit for what the Ravens needed at the position. I also like the
Faux
fit of this
show.
next guy. Our next and I think our final Canadian, John Urschel. Ooh, smart guy.
Smart guy. Went to Penn State, majored in math at the undergrad level, and then had an extra year of eligibility, so he got a master's in math at Penn State. 4.0 GPA for both of those. I don't know about you. That's higher than my GPA was in college.
It's a little higher than mine.
What do you like about the guy?
Well, he profiles as a really good backup lineman. He's not a mauler by any stretch of the imagination, nor is he an incredible athlete, but he looked fairly natural in space, which was good to see, and he was always in the right position. His
Hmm.
guy very, very rarely made the play. He never opened up gaping holes for the running backs to run through, but he rarely let his guy make the play. That appeals to me, especially in a zone blocking scheme. He had a good understanding of positioning. He had a good understanding of how to use his hands and to avoid losing hand fights. So I enjoyed watching him. He again, the Ravens. Maybe this is just a common problem coming out of college, but he seemed to struggle with leverage. He seemed to play high, and that is of course a problem. But I liked the way I think it was the NFL Network that said it, or I don't remember who it was that said it, but they said something along the lines of, "He's so smart, he's going to figure out a way to make it." That's what I saw on tape. A guy that was so smart, he found a way to get his guy blocked, and a lot of times it was pretty ugly, but he found a way, and that appeals to me. I think he's a scrapper, and I think he will be a very solid backup lineman. And when you go in the fifth round, you're not expecting a starter, but I think he will be a very good backup, and I like that value there.
I also think, I mean, obviously being a math major doesn't really factor in too much into how he performs in the NFL, but he clearly is extremely intelligent, like you said. I think he has. I think the Ravens made this pick with the intention of letting him bulk up, learn the scheme, and possibly give him a shot at center. I know they drafted Ryan Jensen for that as well, but I really like what
Jeremy
Urschel.
Utah.
Yeah, yeah, sure. But I just think maybe as a flyer, as a late round center. But like you said, I don't think he's going to be a starter really at any point. Maybe at center if it all pans out really well. But he's a very very solid backup lineman, and it's pretty good value. I like everything I've read about him and seen of him on tape, so I'm not too disappointed. That said, I do have some questions about the guys they passed up to make this pick. Jared Abbrederis out of Wisconsin went one pick after him. They left a couple other receivers like Robert Huron and Matt Hazel, who is, I believe, Taliaferro's teammate at Coastal Carolina. Maybe, I think that's right. So they left three, very solid wide receivers who I think are all going to outperform that draft slot on the board. And we'll get to Campanero in a second, but I think Heron is definitely a very intriguing slot receiver, and Hazel and Abbrederis are both have really good hands, and I really like Abbrederis. I think he's going to be a really solid pro and can run every route in the book. So just from a perspective of what they left on the board, that's my only knock on this pick.
I think that's a fair knock. I really like Abbrederis too, and I would have loved to see the Ravens get him. But I think Urschel's a great fit. I think he's exactly the kind of guy you want in your locker room. He's the kind of guy that is going to be really valuable during film studies. He's going to be the coach's best friend. And I think that appeals to the Ravens, who their offensive line kind of just looked dumb last year. Like they didn't know who to block.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Urschel, it's a lot to ask of a rookie, but I think he's going to help with that. I think he's a guy that's going to kind of challenge the rest of the team in film study. I think he'll point out some things and be a valuable addition to the locker room, even more so than his contributions on the football field.
And it's much more important to be smart and be cognizant of the scheme and your assignments in Kubiak's zone scheme than it is to be, overwhelmingly strong or a tremendous athlete. So
Right, absolutely.
that'll definitely help.
So, what did you give the pick? I gave it an A.
You give it an A.
Yep.
I purely for, and I know that you and I have been sort of grading on different scales. I've been skewing more towards the relative value of the board because they left so many people on the board. I'm gonna give it a C.
A
I really would have liked to see them. I love Aberderis. I think he's going to be a really good pro, and I think he would have been a great fit for this team. And just the other two receivers too. I think they left. They had a chance to pick up an impact receiver this year, and I think they missed it.
Well, to be honest with you, I would sooner see them pass up Crockett Gilmore in the third round and go with Aberderis than give up Urschel here.
Yeah, I wouldn't totally disagree with that, to be honest with you. But this is how the board shook out.
Yep, the board is the end-all be-all.
The board is spoken.
I would kill to see the Ravens' big board.
Yeah, it would be very interesting. And so that was originally their last pick of the day, and then the Ravens traded back into the seventh, giving up a sixth-round pick.
Hold your horses.
I'm
Hold your
holding.
horses. They drafted a quarterback.
Oh, I totally forgot about him.
That doesn't speak well to him, does it?
No, it does not.
Well, his name is Keith Wenning. He's from Ball State, and the Ravens are hoping he turns out to be a better pro than fellow Ball State quarterback Nate Davis, who didn't do a darn thing. But I said the value's right. That's about. It's not a shock that Wenning got drafted.
No, and he's definitely very raw, but he has some really good traits, just in terms of size and arm. I like the fit. I mean, I'm not sure. I know Tyrod Taylor's contract expires next year. I'm not entirely sold that Wenning will be able to be the lone backup quarterback on this roster by next year, but he's definitely an intriguing project.
I was surprisingly impressed with his accuracy and touch.
Mm-hmm.
His arm strength is not great, but he does throw a good deep ball with very good deep accuracy. But where the arm strength comes in, he doesn't have a great zip on his outside throws. He doesn't throw the 15-yard out the way Joe Flacco does, and Lord knows the Ravens love their 15-yard out. He'll never be a starter. I feel comfortable in saying that. He'll never be a starter. But he does have all the traits you look for in a backup. The accuracy, the ability to come in and run a, for lack of a better word, dumbed-down version of the offense and run it very efficiently.
A diluted offense.
Diluted, very good. And I've heard raves about both his intelligence and his leadership. So he has everything you look for in a backup quarterback. The guy that came to mind for me watching on tape was Shaun Hill. If you have Shaun Hill as your backup, you're in very good shape. So I think Wenning has a chance to be the go-to backup. As soon as this year, to be honest, I think he's a better passer than Tyrod is right now.
Sure, I think he definitely needs to work on just the way he reads defenses and the way he goes through his progressions.
Mm-hmm. I do agree.
I think he's very raw in that respect. But
he wasn't forced to in college.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be real. He didn't have the greatest talent around him on the offensive line or in the receiving corps. So We'll see how he adjusts. But I like the pick.
Okay. Well, there's not too much to say about a guy who's never going to start. But the Ravens' last pick might someday start.
Very intriguing. And this is the guy I was talking about before Sean so wisely informed me that I'd left a pick on the board. Michael Campanera, the local product, Wake Forest?
Wake Forest, yeah.
Wake Forest, a little slot receiver who is, I think he looks, at least he plays really quick. He looks kind of explosive in and out of his breaks and with the ball in his hand. He is not as good, I don't think he's a good enough route runner to come in and be the slot receiver from day one. But he definitely has the potential, and I like the fact that they drafted a receiver in this mold to give Flacco a target that he doesn't already have on the roster.
Absolutely, I agree with you. When we were speculating about what kind of receiver the Ravens were looking to add so many months ago, we thought this might be a possibility. Turned out to be the case. Mm-hmm. Campanero is that kind of guy. I mean, he's not quite Wes Welker. He's Danny Amendola.
Yeah, he's in the Amendola-Edelman mold.
Yeah. He's actually a lot faster than I expected, and I know he ran a 4.46 at the Combine, which is a darn good time. But he looked like a little water bug on film.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't expect that. Did I send you that link to the Deadspin thing, white prospects versus black prospects, words they'd already used to describe them?
No, but I think I've seen
Well, it's a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. But I mean, when you look at a white receiver, what you're expecting to hear are words like possession, um,
Mhm.
more
Chain
quick than
mover.
fast,
Yeah.
sneaky fast. He is not. He is more quick than fast. That's true. But he's not sneaky fast. He's just fast. He is a genuinely good athlete, underrated in that regard. I didn't expect that. With the ball in his hands, he's phenomenal. It wouldn't shock me to see him be the punt returner right away. Um, but he's also pretty tough with the ball in his hands.
Yeah.
The one thing that really bugs me is the injury history.
Mhm.
Durability is a huge issue. This isn't like Mosley where they were just the injuries that happen to football players. This guy seems genuinely fragile. I've legitimate concerns about that, and that makes the Amendola comparison that much more accurate.
And much
But
more frightening.
that much more frightening. But when he's on the field, I really liked his tape. I give the player at the spot they got him an A. I'm docking it to a B because they traded a sixth round pick next year to get him.
Which, to be fair, I mean, next year's draft shouldn't be as deep as this one, so in terms of the relative value of the pick, it's probably a wash. But yeah, I never like giving up picks. I do like the player. I like the fit. I don't think he's going to be able to contribute other than on special teams this year. But as a developmental prospect, I really like what he can bring to the Ravens. Also, there weren't many players that were left on the board. The one guy I was kind of intrigued by that went after the Ravens made this selection was Chantrell Henderson, the huge offensive tackle out of Miami. That was originally considered a second round pick in this process. I don't know. I mean, he definitely has some issues. I'm surprised he fell all the way to seventh. So I'm not saying the Ravens should have jumped at a chance for him, but a huge offensive tackle that has already had experience on the right side, who's going to be a really good run blocker at the next level. He's the only player I would have maybe taken a shot on at this point. But the Ravens clearly made this trade to draft Campanera. They think very highly of him. I'm gonna give it a B. I think the upside is there, and I mean the Ravens. I'm happy that they at least drafted a receiver, even though it was in the seventh round again.
And you know what else? If Cam Cameron was still the offensive coordinator, Campanero would definitely get no less than 5 end arounds this year. But I don't think that's a huge part of Kubiak's scheme. So unfortunately, we don't get to see the Campanero end around. But that would be fun to watch because he scoots on the field. He's quick, not sneaky quick, just quick.
And we're done with the draft class.
We're done with the draft class.
What do you think
Uh,
about it as a whole?
I've said this to you before. My biggest problem with this class, especially in the context of last year's class too, you had 2 consecutive defensive-focused drafts, and
Mm-hmm.
yet the Ravens still do not have a promising young pass rusher. When the pass rush is the most important thing on a defense, and you have 2 defensive-oriented drafts and don't get a single pass rusher that you have any confidence in, I don't. I'm not a fan of that.
It is
There,
definitely a concern.
I don't like the top of the Ravens draft this year at all. I really don't. But it kind of reminds me of the Courtney Upshaw draft, where they just got so many role players out of that draft that it turned into a good draft, despite the fact that Upshaw never really panned out.
Well, it's
So
still too early to say he hasn't panned out.
yet, not even yet, he's produced at a level that you expect from a second round pick.
Mm-hmm.
He is graded unfairly because he was their top pick that year.
Yeah.
But I don't love the top of the draft, but I fully expect the Ravens to get no less than 4 or 5 really solid role players, probably 2 or 3 starters out of this draft.
I think Mosley is definitely a Pro Bowler. I think, as I said before, he's the favorite for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think he's going to rack up a lot of tackles. I think Brooks is, I don't know if he will be like a very, very good safety in his rookie year, but I think he'll make enough plays. And I think he will develop into the safety that the Ravens are looking for to pair with Matt Elam. And I mean, you and I differ on Jernigan, obviously. I think I really like the Jernigan pick because the Ravens' defensive line has sort of flown under the radar this offseason as a need. They don't have a lot of proven depth, and they got pushed around. Chris Canty got pushed around a bit last year. Haloti Ngata was not dominant consistently last year. So I like them beefing up the defensive front, and just at least getting some more run stopping in there to help out Arthur Brown as an inside linebacker who can't shed blocks very well right now. So I like the pick. And then the latter half of the draft, I think, is peppered in with good upside, and I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, when I look at the draft, I see Mosley as an immediate starter, Brooks as a starter at some point, and I feel confident that somewhere between Jernigan and Urban, you're getting a starter.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the draft, you're getting role players. And I don't have a problem with that. If you get 2 or 3 starters out of a draft and a bunch of role players, that's a good haul.
Yeah.
So, on the whole, I don't have a problem with the class. But the Ravens still have significant holes. I can't think too highly of it because of that. And I don't think they got any difference makers at the positions that have the most value, being receiver and pass rush, and to a lesser extent, offensive line.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't think this draft moves the needle strongly one way or the other in terms are the Ravens significantly better or worse. They're about the same as they were before. This is a draft that keeps you at 8-8, 9-7. It keeps you competitive. I would really like to see the Ravens in the future get a guy that's going to become a star. I don't see a star in this class.
I think Mosley has some star qualities. As much of a star as you can be as an inside linebacker, at least.
I think he'll be as much of a star as a guy like John Beeson would be.
I think I like the Luke Kuechly comparison. I think he plays sort of. He's not as athletic and just purely quick as Kuechly is, but I see the same sort of instincts on film. So that's my comparison, and that's what I'm sticking to.
That's not a bad comparison. I see it. But, of course, the Ravens have a lot more rookies than the guys they drafted.
17 more, to be precise. At least that was the number. Maybe that number's even risen right now. That was the number when I checked earlier in the week. But 17 undrafted free agents they brought in, which is just a boatload. How many do they normally bring in? That number seems extremely high.
I think they bring in more than that, to be honest. I think they'll bring more in by the end of the offseason. I mean, keeping in mind that they have a roster of like 85 guys at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
So I think they'll have more than that long term. That said, I fully expect the Ravens to keep a couple of these guys.
Oh, absolutely.
With only 4 cornerbacks on the roster before they added all these undrafted free agents, 1 or 2 of those guys is going to have a really good chance to make the roster.
And someone to keep an eye on that I kind of like. I haven't watched film really, but I think Sammy Seamster out of Middle Tennessee State. He just has a really good size, speed. He's just a good athlete. So I think he's someone to keep an eye on that they might try and stash on the practice squad and develop. I think he's my favorite of all the defensive backs.
Yeah, and it's hard to say because these guys were such low prospects that tape is hard to come by for us laymen. So unfortunately, I looked for Seamster. I really did, but I couldn't find any tape on him.
And then the other guy that I think would be a favorite to make the roster would be James Hurst, the offensive tackle out of North Carolina, who was, I think, probably going to be a mid-round pick before he broke his fibula, and that, I guess, dropped him all the way out of the draft.
Yeah.
Still a project, but yeah, go on.
He's the only guy that I was able to find tape for. And I watched him compete against Jadeveon Clowney, and he competed against Jadeveon Clowney.
He did a very good job. Although that was the game where Clowney was out of gas, and he received all the flack for not having a high motor. So.
Yeah, but be that as it may, Hurst performed well, and he has a lot of traits you look for in a right tackle. I think he could become a mauler with some work. I'd like to see the Ravens have a mauler because I miss having holes for the Ravens running backs to run through.
I'm sure they miss it too.
I bet they do. But that's pretty much it in terms of undrafted free agents. They didn't get a Shane Scove, unfortunately.
Who did go undrafted. And
he went undrafted, and I'm ticked the Ravens didn't add him.
Yes, and of course he went to the 49ers like my man Crush Jimmy Ward. Are you kidding me?
Are you kidding me? Well, that really irked me that the Ravens weren't even linked to Scove.
Mm-hmm.
I find that very, very irksome.
Irksome, for a nice
Irksome.
word.
Yeah, very
All right.
frustrating. You know how strongly I feel about Shane Scove. He's going to be a stud. I still firmly believe that.
All right. Well, I think Jimmy Ward is going to be an absolute beast, so watch out for that, so that I'll be proved right, and everyone can rejoice in how smart I am.
Yeah. Speaking of San Francisco, second safety in 2 years in the first round.
Following that
And it's
Seattle
not like it
model.
was a hot. Yeah, I guess so, but it's not like they were. I mean, no offense, but Jimmy Ward was a borderline second round prospect, and it's not like Eric Reed was a flawless safety. So
He was really good though. He made a lot of good plays. I think, and I like that defensive backfield. And Arizona did it too. They got Matthew last year and Dion Buchanan in the first round this year, which was, I think, also a reach. But
definitely a reach. But he'll lay the hammer down on some people this year. He'll make some highlight reels. Don't worry about that.
you talking about Scove?
No, Buchanan.
Oh, okay, yeah, for sure. All right. Do you want to wrap up by talking about what the Ravens still have to do this offseason?
Yeah. Well, the Ravens have a lot to do this offseason yet. That was very Lancastrian of me to use yet to mean still. Um, but I would still say they need to add a veteran at safety.
Yeah, I
They
think
really do.
there's definitely the possibility that Brooks is not ready right just yet.
Yes. Um, I do not have faith in their tackle situation,
No.
but based on the moves they're making, I almost question whether they consider Osemele more of a tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now, their best lineup is probably with Osemele at tackle.
And who at guard? I know
Honestly,
that.
I would say Ja Reed, but clearly they don't think he's any better than AQ Shipley. And
I
Ja Reed's
think.
got
I
a rough.
mean, we haven't seen him yet. Everything I've read and seen and heard suggests that they are really high on Ryan Jensen.
Right,
Who?
and that would be an option too.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd feel more comfortable with Jensen at guard or Wagner at tackle. But regardless, I don't want to have to deal with that. The
Mhm.
Ravens should go out and get somebody. Not an expensive guy. I do think that between Jensen and Wagner, one of those guys will turn into a starter at some point.
My money's on Wagner.
Then I'll put my money on Jensen to be contrarian.
How lovely. Okay, well, we talked about him before. This is a name that has been thrown up a lot. Eric Winston makes too much sense to go unsigned, don't you think?
To an extent, but he did struggle at times last year.
Yeah, well, he has not been the same since he left Houston.
Yeah.
But I just think in terms of being a leader, in terms of knowing the scheme, in terms of being, a reliable left tackle as an insurance option at least, I have to imagine that they are looking long and hard at the option of signing him.
I'm sure they are, and plus the price tag at this point would not be
No,
prohibitive at
not
all.
at all. Yeah.
So there's no reason to at least not look into it.
Mm-hmm. Another position is, I think, cornerback. I mean, it would be a big bonus if one of these undrafted cornerbacks turned into, the number 3 corner this year. And I'm a big fan of Shockey Brown, but some insurance is definitely needed. So I think, and especially considering the youth of that position, getting a veteran corner would be nice.
Yeah, I am inclined to agree with you there. I personally am more fond of Asa Jackson than I
Mm-hmm.
am with Shockey Brown. But I do agree with you. A veteran would be a very nice pickup there. And as good as the top two is, if Jimmy Smith keeps doing what he was doing last year, and Lardarius Webb comes back on strong, he did get stronger as the year went on. They're pretty strong in the top two.
Yeah, but if someone gets hurt,
Exactly.
serious
If someone gets
issues.
hurt, I do not want to see Asa Jackson or Shockey Brown starting. That scares me.
Yeah. And along those lines, there obviously aren't many good guys on the market, but I think they really need to pounce on a salary cap casualty as an edge rusher if someone becomes available. Because,
Right.
like those cornerbacks, if Suggs or Dumerville goes down, the Ravens' pass rush is basically decapitated.
Yeah.
They won't die at the outside linebacker position because they can throw in Upshaw and McPhee. but that pass rush is severely weakened if one of those guys gets hurt. And
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they were great to start the year, but if they continue to play like they did at the second half of the season, there's no pass rush to begin with. So there needs to be some insurance there.
Yeah, and that's why I'm kicking myself for this. Well, I'm kicking the Ravens for this draft. It was a strong pass rush draft. Admittedly, a lot of guys went higher than they should have. But there were a lot of young, talented guys that were probably going to go off the board in the second or third round, and I would have really liked to see them grab one. Now, yeah, a lot of guys did go higher than expected, like Dee Ford and the guy from Louisville whose name escapes me at the moment.
Marcus Smith.
There you go. But like I said, 2 drafts in a row, defensive focused. Still no promising young pass rushers on the roster. The most promising young pass rusher on the roster is Adrian Hamilton. They call him Shakespeare because all he does is make plays. That's a real thing. But I enjoyed watching Hamilton in the preseason last year. But when your most promising young pass rusher is a guy who you signed off the Cowboys practice squad, who couldn't even make the Cowboys, you got problems. You really do.
Sure.
And it boggles my mind that it just doesn't seem to be a priority for them. So if I'm the Ravens, I'm definitely paying attention to the cuts during training camp. And if I see a young prospect that gets cut and a team's thinking, okay, maybe we'll get him on the practice squad, I say, oh, no, you're not. We're taking him. Because, I mean, a guy to pay attention to would be Michael Sam, even. Late in the draft.
Yeah, definitely intriguing.
Late in the draft, he gets picked by a team that's already very strong at his position. He's going to have a hard time making that roster. But he
By the
does have
way, that Rams front line is monstrous.
Yes. I like what the Rams are doing. They're very strong on both lines right now. Getting stronger.
I don't think they picked up the weapon that Sam Bradford needs, but if he's ready, that whole division is so good.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be fun to watch.
Just think we were saying the exact opposite not 2 or 3 years ago.
I know, it's pretty crazy.
So, funny how the NFL works like that. But Michael Sam's a guy to keep an eye on. And I know the Ravens were rumored to be very interested in him. I'm fairly confident he was one of their 180 draftable guys.
I would definitely agree with that, and that's a good point. I'd been thinking about possible cuts. I had not thought of his name, and yeah, that's a very good point. Well done, Sean.
Thank you.
And that's also the other point to consider. You know, we talked about compensatory picks to death this offseason. Ozzy's going to wait and see who gets cut before he makes a move on any of these unrestricted free agents, I think, which is the reason why if they do end up signing Winston, it's going to be right before the very start of training camp, if then.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. Ozzy makes moves late. This isn't the time of year for the Ravens to be making a whole heck of a lot of moves. He makes moves late, so don't expect anything coming immediately.
And yeah, he'll definitely want to give the young guys a chance, like the Wagners and the Jensens and all those defensive ends and Arthur Brown. So yeah.
Right. And speaking of the young guys, this is the rookie minicamp's coming up. So that'll be fun. Good to see the boys in purple and black again, if only shortly. And something we'll be paying attention to because I'll be curious to see. Well, there's a lot I'm curious to see. So I'm looking forward to seeing these guys travel to Owings Mill, Maryland, and go into the castle and putting on the purple and black and playing football.
Yeah, one step closer to the football, Sean.
One
step out of the way.
Yep.
And overall, it was a good one, I have to say.
Yes. Yeah, it was always fun to watch. And congratulations to the teams that got better. My condolences to the teams that didn't. Not sure which one the Ravens are yet, but we'll see.
We will see. And that is all for this week's episode of Raven Central Radio, unless I'm missing something, Sean.
Yeah, I did want to put out a shout-out. Well, not a shout-out. It's the off-season. At times, there's not a lot to say. But we would love to answer your questions. We would love suggestions from our listeners about things that you would like us to cover more in depth. Shahan and I want to be the thinking man's Ravens show, and we want to dig deeper than the other shows. So if there's a player that you want us to look at in particular, please tweet at us. I'm at 63 Brubaker. Shahan's at Shahan_Pieris. That's Peiris.
Thank you.
That's an exotic name.
And of course, the show's Twitter handle is at RavensPFC.
Right? And if you tweet at any one of those 3 Twitter handles, we will get back to you. So please let us know if there's something you want to cover. Otherwise, we have ideas. Do not worry. We do have ideas. But
And while we're shamelessly plugging, you can check out my Ravens work on Bleacher Report.
yes, you can. And you can check out my Cordell, Oklahoma work at the Cordell Beacon. Not that I expect you to do that. But Shahan, would you agree with my sentiment that we would like to hear from people?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, would love to answer questions regardless of their topic, even if they're not Ravens related. Sean and I are great human beings. We'd love to give general life advice. If you want us to watch a player, we love watching film. So hit us up.
Yep. And I think I might talk to you about starting Prospect of the Week for next year's draft soon.
Oh, good lord.
I already watched Amari Cooper.
Let's not do that.
Okay. Well, unless Shahan has something else, this has been another episode of Raven Central Radio. We came at you live, and we hope you enjoyed it. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, we hope you enjoyed it without having to stare at our ugly mugs. So until next week, Ravens fans, this is Raven Central Radio.
Peace.